Welcome to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson and I ask my guests one simple question. Why? Focusing on the importance of why, I share with you the relatable, uplifting and inspiring conversations I have with people from all walks of life. This podcast will encourage you to focus on your why to enable and empower you to achieve the success you desire. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Today on the Focus on Why podcast, I am joined by Louise Righton, SSAS Superstar Louise, that is. Welcome.
Thanks, Amy. Thank you for having me. I'm a super fan of your podcast. I think I've listened to pretty much all of them so far, so I'm really honoured to be asked along and excited to share my story.
Well, I think you're probably about the only person who's managed to catch up with all of the episodes because there have been quite a few. So well done on that.
I'm a big podcast consumer. I through lockdown set myself the challenge of 12,000 steps a day. So that is about 2 podcasts a day. So that's the rate that I consume.
Perfect. Well, this podcast was specifically designed just for you.
That's right. It must have been.
Well, I mean, in essence, it really is. It was to help people through lockdown right at the outset. I just knew that there would be a space for it. And then it's just carried on and it's just hit the hearts of so many people. And as of today, which we're recording back in September, I know this is coming out a little bit later in October, but this podcast is in 56 countries. And I know that there'll be more by that point. And it's just crazy. You know, you can get your words out there to a global audience nowadays. And you know that as an author.
Absolutely, I do. Yeah, no, it's amazing. Well done on what you've achieved with it, Amy. And I know it's going to go from strength to strength.
Thank you. Absolutely. Very exciting space to be in. So let's just go back to my introduction. I called you a SSAS Superstar. What does that mean?
Well, what I'm doing, Amy, is right now I'm helping to educate and inspire people to take control of their personal economy using a tool called a SSAS pension, which is something that I have done. So a SSAS stands for a small self-administered scheme. It's often called a director's pension. It's essentially a pension trust that's set up by a limited company for the benefit of the directors, really. And it allows the directors effectively to manage their own pension linked to the company, and to be in control of the investments that they make. And crucially, they can use the pension as a bank to loan into the business, which is where the appeal is really. It's used by entrepreneurs to build property portfolios. It's used by business people to grow and expand their businesses. So I am a SSAS trustee, which means I have a SSAS pension. And as I say, I'm helping to educate and inspire people to do what I have done in terms of taking control of my personal economy through a SSAS pension. I am personally working to leave a financial legacy to support my 2 children. Who have got special educational needs and disabilities. And I identified about 2 years ago that a SSAS could be a tool for me to enable that legacy. And so that's kind of why I've become a SSAS trustee. And then through my book, as I say, I'm just trying to get the message out there that a SSAS is a powerful tool for planning your legacy and also for planning for wealth building as well, which is its appeal really.
And you're not the first guest to come on who has been a SSAS trustee. There's quite a few of us who are, but we're not in a majority. There aren't that many out there.
There are, I believe at the last count, just over 22,000 SSASs, active SSASs in this country, which when you think about the size of our population and the number of people that have pensions, now I know that's declining over time and perhaps younger people aren't opting in to workplace pensions or even private pensions in the same way that they used to. But if you think about the sheer number of adults, of working age in this country that have pensions, then 22,000 is a tiny minority. And so, I do think it's inherent to being a SSAS trustee, actually, that you are prepared to, break out of the status quo and swim against the tide and do something different. which is one of the reasons it appeals to me, actually, with my personality type. But yeah, you're right, we are in the minority, and as women we're very much in the minority, Amy.
Absolutely. Well, taking control of your personal economy is an incredible thing to do, and not without sort of the risks and the responsibilities. There are a lot attached to that. But you mentioned legacy, and you talked about your children. What specifically can it do to help them?
Yeah, well, I guess, thinking about setting up the SSAS for me, the triggers were twofold. There were two triggers, really. The first trigger was I was approaching 50, and I was starting to think about how long I wanted to continue to work full time in corporate life before retiring, or at least maybe scaling down the pace of my work. I love what I do, and I still do it in terms of, my professional career, but I wanted to start to prepare, for life after corporate life. So, I set the goal that by 55, I would be achieving financial independence and able to have that choice to leave corporate life if I wish to do that. And so one of the things that I want to do personally is to do more work advocating within the special educational needs and disability space, and again, supporting parents to do what I have done, which is securing an educational health and care plan for my eldest daughter, which was a huge amount of work. I describe it as sort of the lost year of my life, really. We can maybe talk a bit more about that. But, that's, for me, the reason for me for setting up the SSAS was about giving me time to do the things that I want to do, and to support others, and to share the journey that I've been on, and for people to learn from that. But secondly, I suppose the deeper why really is, my two daughters, both of who've got special educational needs and disabilities. And so the SSAS is a way to leave a legacy, because specifically it differs from other pensions in that it doesn't die with you. And just a little backstory on this Amy, to do with the name of our SSAS. A SSAS has a name, just like a business does, and it's registered with HMRC as an entity. And we called our SSAS Ebony SSAS, after ebony wood. And the reason for that is my eldest daughter came up with this, actually, because ebony wood has a spiritual meaning in paganism, meaning something precious that has to be looked after for the next generation. So that's what having the SSAS is all about to me. Yes, it's about, trying to retire early and spending more time doing things that I want to do, and sort of, the money aspects. But it is actually about, leaving that legacy to the children as well. Another part of the Ebony story, actually, is we found some writing by J.K. Rowling of Harry Potter fame, and she talks about about wands made of ebony wood, ebony wand wood. She talks about it being happiest in the hands of those that are nonconformist and highly individual, and who have the courage to be themselves and not be swayed from their purpose. And these all describe the reasons really for choosing to go a different path, with those 22,000 other people and that small minority, breaking free of the norms and the expected ways to sort of work up to a retirement age and then retire. So, all of that was really meaningful to us, really. But I mean, just the specifics on the pension. When you have a corporate pension, sometimes called a defined benefit or a final salary pension, if you live to a grand old age and keep drawing that pension every year, the benefits are fantastic, and they just go on and on and on. The pension never runs out, right? But if you die prematurely, then the pension dies with you. So if you have a spouse as a beneficiary, which in my case I would have, my husband, if I died prematurely, he would only get half of my pension entitlement to look after himself and our children. So having a husband without a pension pension accruals of his own, because he has spent a lot of time looking after the children while I've worked, because of their special needs, then that was a very scary thought to me, that if I died, that pension could die with me, leaving them not with nothing, because obviously there's other provision for them, but certainly a huge chunk of my wealth and my legacy would be lost. So that was a big driver to me. So a SSAS essentially means that you are you're not operating within the constraints of those corporate rules. You take the pot out of that corporate pension pot, it becomes yours to manage. You take the risk of that as well as the benefits of that. It's to be taken very, very seriously. You're in charge of what potentially is your biggest bank account, or certainly one of your biggest bank accounts, and it's really important to take that seriously, learn about it and get that right. But that for me was the big driver of becoming a SSAS trustee. Yes, as I say, it was about the, using it to drive my business, to drive financial independence. But really critically, it was about, I've got control of that now, and it can't disappear overnight if I do. It is still there for the family. It's a trust. It's a legacy. And so for my particular situation, and everyone's situation is different, but for my particular situation, that was a key driver for me.
Can you remember, Louise, the moment when you discovered SSAS and what it would be able to do for you?
I can, Amy. I first came across SSAS in late 2018. I remember the dates quite well. We were looking at ways to grow our property business. We've got a small buy-to-let portfolio, we're residential landlords, and we wanted to start to get into, other property strategies, perhaps commercial property, perhaps, more business type property, like, let's say serviced accommodation or holiday letting, for example. So we came across the idea of using my pension, to really propel that business forward, to fund that business, and to expand that portfolio. And I think that's a pretty common way that people get introduced to SSAS, sort of through the property community. So I started to learn about SSAS. I recognised the benefits immediately, but I also saw that there was a lot to learn and there was a lot of responsibility to take on. So it's funny actually, because I always say I was in the right place at the right time, because I was learning about SSAS from sort of late 2018 through to early 2019. And then I heard in April 2019, Mark Stokes was launching something called the SSAS Alliance in London, and there was to be a big launch conference, and this was somewhere where I could go and meet SSAS trustees and really learn about SSAS. So the rest is history, really. I went along to that conference. I learned lots about SSAS. I met Mark. I met his business partner, Nigel Green. I networked with a lot of, fantastic SSAS trustees, some of which have been on your podcast, actually. I met Michelle Bryant on that day, who's a great friend of mine now. A few other people as well. And that really started sort of the snowball for me, really. I saw what was possible. I saw what people were doing. I saw how professional, everyone was. And I realised that this was an opportunity for me to take control of my pension and to create that legacy that I so wanted to create for my family. But I also saw it was a highly professional, network of, really polished and professional business people. And so there was no, whiff of a scam or anything, around any of this. So I joined SSAS Alliance as a founder member, continued to sort of network in that community. I started to go out and I helped get some of the sort of local branches going up in Yorkshire and in the East Midlands as well, and just really enjoyed immersing myself in that community. And that led to me getting to know Mark, who, we're now co-authors and co-producers of our latest book, SSAS Superstars. And that led to me ultimately, pressing the buttons and setting up my SSAS. So it's been kind of a really exciting sort of coming up for a couple of years, really. A real roller coaster as well, because it is a huge decision. You know, there were sleepless nights. There were, you know, waking up in the morning in the cold sweat thinking, what am I doing? You know, this is, you know, potentially a risky thing to do. But, you know, just getting comfortable with all of that, really.
And you mentioned earlier about a lost year of your life. Was that an inspiration for the book?
Oh, interesting. Lost year of my life was, I maybe have had two lost years, actually. The first lost year of my life was actually fighting the system for my daughter's education. I was actually sitting watching Panorama last night. It was called, I think, Fighting for an Education, and it was about the special educational needs and disabilities and how parents are, you know, really having to fight really hard against the system to get the support and to get the education that their children need. And so, you know, in a nutshell, my story is I had to go through that. I had to fight the system. I had to take my local council to the Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Tribunal, to court, basically. I spent a year of my life working in my day job, studying Send Law in the evening, building my case. And I spent close to a five-figure sum paying professionals to represent me in court. And I went through that and I won. There was no way I was going to lose. I won, and I got everything that I needed for my daughter. But that was a lost year. I did very little else in that year. So no, the book, I guess, you know, the book, the inspiration for the book was really from networking in the SSAS community, from talking to other trustees. And, you know, what I will say is, you know, because of these 22,000 people with SSAS pensions, there's not a lot of material out there. There's not a lot of education. Most of the education currently is coming through Mark and Nigel and the SSAS Alliance. And Mark had already written a brilliant book in 2019 called SSAS Pensions, which was a fantastic overview of what you could do with a SSAS. And what he and Nigel and their families had done with their SSAS. And as I networked, you know, I could see people were kind of going to these networking meetings and going, what are you doing with yours? What are your plans? What have you done? Do you know anyone who's done this? Do you know anyone who's done that strategy? And there was just this hunger for knowledge, and I think a hunger for just real life stories. And so that's where the idea for the book came from. So as a new trustee, or as a trustee going on their journey of setting up my SSAS and then becoming a competent SSAS trustee, I'm still working on that, to be honest. I was naturally picking out people that I thought were shining lights and that I thought were doing a good job of being SSAS trustees and were pretty competent at it and were doing, you know, really inspirational things to grow their wealth and to grow their legacy. So I was targeting people anyway for discussions because I'm a real networker. And I thought, as I was talking to people, I thought, you know, I could keep this to myself, or I could write a book. So I identified 10 SSAS trustees, and I said, would you be interviewed by me, and would you let me write your stories into a book? So the book is basically, it's 10 chapters, it's 10 case studies from 10 trustees, and it's about their real life stories. So it's not a boring pensions manual. It's 10 biographies in a way. And it's warts and all. You know, some people have had, you know, real tragedy in their lives. Some people have had real challenge in their life. You know, these are 10 real stories from real people that have set up SSAS pensions and then use those to fuel their businesses, to protect their businesses, to protect their family wealth legacy, and to really grow their family's wealth. And I thought these stories are just too good not to be shared. So I approached Mark to write the book with me. So we did a true joint venture, and we wrote it together. We developed it and co-produced it. So yeah, that's where the book came from. But the book took me about a year, so I might describe that as a lost year as well, Amy. I did very little other than sort of work and wake up every morning thinking, I've got to make progress on this book. So that was maybe a lost year as well.
I don't think you quite realise what the implications will be and the knock-on ripple effect of the book, because it is going to inspire so many people in for generations to come, because of the story case studies. And I've been privileged to sort of have read those before the book was released, because it was just so interesting to hear the diversity of what can be done, and it will inspire future generations. So I don't think it is a lost year. I think it as an investment in everybody around you's lives in terms of passing on the knowledge.
Yeah, you're right. It was an investment. I mean, just the same way as my first lost year was also an investment. That was an investment in my daughter, who has significant special educational needs and disabilities, significant challenges. And as I say, that year, investing in learning the law and in going to appeal and in, investing financially in that process was very much an investment in her future, which is now much more secure, than it would have been. And then, as I say, the SSAS and the family legacy, really follows on from that.
So what's happening next? What's in the pipeline for you?
Next for me is building my property portfolio. So I am a property investor. I am still working full time. We've not particularly talked about what I do now, but I do work full time in a corporate role. I am a property investor. I'm building my own portfolio. So far with my SSAS, I've made a series of mainly third-party secured property development loans. So I've loaned my pension out to other property developers, for a fixed return. Sometimes for a fixed return, sometimes for an equity position. So next, I will be pursuing, I think, some of the more own business focused strategies that you can pursue with SSAS. So, for example, a loan back to my own business to expand my property portfolio. I'm particularly interested at the moment in serviced accommodation and holiday lets. So I'll be, I'm kind of in the education phase of that right now and looking to, sort of turn that wheel. But my SSAS can really be kind of rocket fuel for that wheel, really. I've got my own bank, and instead of going out for mortgage finance or development finance, I can leverage my SSAS to fund that business. So that's what's next for me. I hope to be doing some more writing, and we're getting the first feedback to the book now, because that's been out on Amazon for a couple of weeks now, and I've had some fantastic feedback from people that are already SSAS trustees, but also people that are considering SSAS as something that could play a role in their personal wealth building journey and also create a legacy for them. And so much fantastic feedback. Someone I know quite well said to me, if only I'd had this, 5 years ago when I was starting my SSAS journey. This is exactly what the community wants. So I hope to do more writing. I hope that's not my only book. My English teacher when I was 14 told me I would be a writer, actually, and I've always kind of had this pent up need to write. I've written over the years, as a professional marketer. I've done quite a lot of writing. And I've done magazine articles, I've done professional trade journals and things like that. But this is my first book, and maybe more will follow. I hope so. But I need to carve out more time and perhaps backtrack from my corporate career to find time to do that, Amy.
Well, you talk about carving out your own time, and what I find about the SSAS people and people who are SSAS superstars, let's call them all superstars, they have taken responsibility for their future. They do know their why, and it's about carving out their own futures and also creating the legacies for the generations to come. And that is the beauty and the power of a SSAS. And I think that's something that's really important, that it's never too late. You said earlier that you were approaching 50 and you wanted to sort of reassess the whole situation, and that's what is possible. And you don't have to wait until then. You can start now. There's quite a few younger generations in their sort of 20s, 30s, 40s who are thinking, oh, this is actually a tool that could be really useful.
That's really true. And, I know part of what Mark and Nigel try to do through SSAS Alliance, and certainly what they do through their own SSAS with their own families, and they, so then they really showcase this as an example, is trying to get the younger generation interested in pensions, because, most of us are guilty, aren't we, of thinking, I know certainly pre-50, my pension was way out there in the future. You kind of, you got the pension statement every year through the post, you read it, you thought, okay, that's fine. And it didn't really mean anything. And you sort of shoved it in the filing cabinet. And then you did the same again next year. But, and I think that, the younger generations, they don't resonate with pensions. So, but, there is a story to be told here, because you can start really young. As soon as you're 18, you can become a SSAS trustee. You can join your parents' SSAS. You can join a group SSAS. You can start your own SSAS. All you need is a limited company, to sponsor the SSAS, and you can be up and running. It's a tax efficient way to build your wealth. It's a way to propel your business forward. And, that's why, that's one of the reasons I've written the book. And, we've got a whole mix of people in the book. The 10 superstars range from people that have gone into semi-retirement now and, perhaps using their SSAS, drawing some of it down, using it towards property development. There are others that are, still have got sort of, a good 10, 15, 20 years of their working life to go, and are seeing a real opportunity to build that legacy, for their families. And that's the beauty of it, really. And, the fact that you can use it, you can leverage it as a fund to propel your business. So, the ideal scenario, and what many trustees are trying to do, is to use their pension to build their business such that they never actually have to touch their pension, and they leave it as a legacy because they've used the SSAS to fund, a business growth, whether that's property or any other kind of business. And that becomes the thing, that they are able to live on in their retirement, leaving the SSAS pretty much untouched as a legacy. And, that's, as I say, coming back to our SSAS, Ebony SSAS, that's certainly what I was trying to do, creating something that could be looked after for the future generations and creating that legacy.
And how does it feel to know that you've taken control and that you are now leaving a legacy behind for your family?
It feels very empowering, Amy. I've already touched on, it's not an easy decision to make, and nor should it be, to do what I have done and to do what many SSAS trustees do, and that is taking control of what's seen as a gold-plated, corporate pension. These are the pensions that, you shouldn't mess around with. And there's a lot of kind of status quo thinking out there about pensions. A lot of IFAs, for example, are sceptical about SSAS pensions. The kind of pension I had, and that many people of my age have, as I say, is seen as a gold-plated pension that's guaranteed every year until you die. Why on earth would you mess around with that? Why on earth would you take control and start to as a novice investor, potentially start to take control of that and invest it. But so it's a big decision, and it's not to be taken lightly. And it took me around a year to make the decision, which I think is pretty typical, having talked to a lot of trustees. But the feeling is very empowering. And I'm one of the 22,000 now. I'm in the minority. As I said earlier, I'm pretty happy swimming against the tide, doing something differently if it's right for me. I'm happy to be, an innovator. I'm happy to do something that's different from received wisdom. You've got to be comfortable with that approach, to become a SSAS trustee, I would say. But it feels very empowering, and I know that it will get me to my goals of financial independence, perhaps earlier than I would have got to. Financial independence so that I can have choices, while I still have energy and a difference to make. And as I say, will deliver that legacy for my children, to support them in the future. The pension won't die with me, and that's just so important to me.
So who's inspired you on your journey?
Oh, that's a really good question. All of the SSAS trustees that I've met have really inspired me. Mark Stokes really inspired me as he set up SSAS Alliance and gave a platform to SSAS trustees to talk about their journeys, and their challenges and their difficulties as well. What else? A few things really. I guess in terms of people that have inspired me, I often recommend to people that are having difficulties, and often they might be women in business, or women in the property world, or maybe even women trying to sort of set up SSAS pensions. I often recommend a TED talk that I've watched a few times. And it's 3 lessons on success from an Arab businesswoman. I don't know if you've seen it. It's Dr. Layla Hattate, and she talks about 3 lessons that she's learned from being in business, within that Arab culture. But the big one that I take away, and I've scrolled on my notice board here in front of me, is use SHIT for fuel. So she says, when people criticize you, when people tell you you're not doing the right thing, when people tell you you're doing something different, and they're trying to kind of say, who are you to do that? Do you have permission to do that? Then don't take that on board, but use it as the fuel that drives you. And I think that's important for all of us to remember. So I think that's a great TED talk, and something that all women should watch, actually, and all women in business for sure.
And have there been any books that have particularly inspired you?
Yeah, I'm currently reading. Gosh, it's all the bad language now, Amy. I'm currently reading How to Be Effing Awesome by Dan Meredith. It's a well-known one, isn't it? Many people mention it. I love it. A lot of the advice, it's an easy-to-read book. A lot of the advice in there is obvious, but it's about reminding yourself about it is okay to be really selfishly focused on your goals. Be around like-minded people. That's what I have found in the last couple of years. Be around like-minded people to support you. Don't care too much about the status quo and the received wisdom and what other people think, because there will be naysayers, whatever you're doing. And particularly, in my own experience of doing something very different with my pension and with my future and with my retirement. So don't care about what other people think, and be happy to be individual. He says, be happy to be a little bit weird. So that's how he describes it. And we certainly embrace that in our household, which is full of neurodiversity, with one daughter with autism and many other special needs, and the other child with ADHD as well. So we're all about embracing the weird and being yourself and being different. And linked to that, really, an important book I think it's important for anyone for everyone to read, whether they are touched by autism personally or not, is a book called Neurotribes by Steve Silberman, and he talks about, how we need to think smarter about people who think differently. He says, is autism a disability, or is it just a cognitive way of being that allows the human race to actually propel forward? And, I'm obviously in this world every day, and I've had my struggles, fighting for the support that my daughter needs. And we tend to think of autism as a disability and as a limiter. And of course, in a neurotypical world, it is. But when you reflect upon the people with autism, or who we think have been autistic, that have really changed the world, they are many, and too many to mention. But, when you think about Einstein, Newton, Diane Fossey, they were all autistic, so hyper-focused on, what they were discovering and theorising about. Alan Turing was undoubtedly autistic. What a breakthrough he made. From the world of the arts, Tim Burton, Lewis Carroll, these fantastic creative personalities and creative minds. And when you think of neurodiversity in those terms, you do understand how these minds are propelling the human race forward, which is, the theory is that's why autism is actually on the increase. People have different theories. It's been diagnosed more. We understand it more. All of that's undoubtedly true. But there is also a theory that, autistics are propelling us forward, and therefore, are being successful in the gene pool in a way. And that's part of what is talked about in this book. So I think, I do encourage people to read that book and understand. As I say, it touches our lives personally. We know that autistic people have huge contributions to make, and yet are very limited in their employment opportunities, much more so than other disabilities. There's some frightening figures that I can't put my hands on right now, but only 32% of autistic adults are in some kind of paid employment, compared to 80% of non-disabled people and 47% of disabled people. Just 16% of autistic adults are in full-time paid employment. And when you understand those figures, you understand my why, and my driver for creating that legacy, because my child is very intelligent, is in a top selective school, and you're very what's called high functioning, but needs a huge amount of support to actually function in everyday life. So having the brain and that cognitive ability is not necessarily a guarantee that an autistic person will get on and be successful in a neurotypical world. So that's my little soapbox moment, Amy. But I think I just want to get that message across. That's important for me as an autism advocate and as an autism mum as well.
Well, it's a really powerful message, and I think that there's a lot to be taken from all of that. Louise, it's been an absolute pleasure having your SSAS Superstar presence on the show today, and I just want to wish you all the best with the book, which has been so far really well received and will continue to be so, and let that ripple effect continue. How would people get in contact with you?
Thanks, Amy. So, you can find me in the usual socials. I'm on Facebook as Louise Righton. I'm on Instagram as lusas_property. You'll find me as Louise Righton if you search, and LinkedIn as Louise Righton as well. And I'm active in all those. And I'm more than happy for anyone to contact me around anything I've talked about, really, but particularly to find out more about SSAS.
Well, I'll make sure all of those details are in the show notes going on, so that's no problem at all. Do you have a final message for everyone today?
Yeah, I think I would say, Amy, my message is about daring to be different, dare to be different. Have the courage, to pursue your purpose and to create a legacy. be an ebony wand bearer. You know, I talked earlier about ebony wood having all those special characteristics and being most suited to the hands of the nonconformist and the individual, those pursuing their purpose and not being detracted from that. So yeah, pursue your passion, pursue your purpose, create your legacy, and be an ebony wand bearer is my message.
Thank you for listening to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson, and if you've enjoyed this episode, please leave me a 5-star Apple Podcast review. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram and Facebook, and become a member of my inspiring, uplifting and positive Focus on Why Facebook group. I help people to focus on their why with clarity, uniting their passion with their purpose with a plan, to create the life they truly desire. If you would like me to help you focus on your why, then please book a free 20-minute coaching call via calendly.com/Amy Rowlandson. And if you haven't already, please sign up for the Friday Focus weekly newsletter via my website, amyrowlandson.com. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.